Long before the modern world knew the name Israel, an ancient inscription carved in stone would immortalize a people whose story would echo through millennia. In the 13th century before the Common Era, the Egyptian pharaoh Meremptah declared victory over many lands, and among them, he mentioned Israel. This weathered stele, standing in a museum today, represents the first time in recorded history that the name Israel appears outside of religious texts. The region itself was known by many names throughout the ages: Canaan, Phoenicia, Palestine, Judea, and after Rome's final conquest, Syria-Palestina. But to understand how Israel came to be, we must journey back even further to a time when the Eastern Mediterranean was a crossroads of civilizations. According to ancient traditions, the story begins with a man named Abram, later known as Abraham, who journeyed from the great cities of Mesopotamia to the land of Canaan. This was a land already ancient, already sophisticated, with 2,000 years of recorded civilization behind it. Abraham's grandson Jacob, also called Israel meaning perseveres with God, would give his name to a people. Among Jacob's 12 sons, Joseph became the most remarkable, sold into slavery by his jealous brothers only to rise to power in Egypt through his extraordinary gift of interpreting dreams. When famine struck the land of Canaan, Joseph's family came to Egypt and were welcomed. For generations, they prospered in the shadow of the pyramids, but their success would ultimately become their downfall. The Israelites, according to tradition, eventually found themselves enslaved in Egypt, their freedom stripped away as their numbers grew and the Egyptians feared their strength. For generations, they labored under the hot Egyptian sun, building monuments to pharaohs who saw them only as property. Then came Moses, a Hebrew raised in Pharaoh's palace who would become their liberator. The story tells of plagues and miracles, of a divine intervention that forced Pharaoh to release his slaves. Moses led his people on an epic exodus from Egypt, receiving divine law on Mount Sinai, wandering 40 years through the harsh wilderness. Though Moses himself would never enter the Promised Land, his lieutenant Joshua would lead the people across the Jordan River and, according to biblical accounts, conquer the cities of Canaan around 1250 before the Common Era. Whether Joshua's conquest happened exactly as written remains a mystery that archaeologists and historians continue to debate. What we do know is that tremendous upheaval shook the entire region between 1250 and 1150 before the Common Era, a period scholars call the Bronze Age collapse. Cities burned, populations shifted, and old empires crumbled. Out of this chaos, a people calling themselves Israelites emerged in the highlands of Canaan. Rather than a sudden military conquest, many scholars now believe these Israelites gradually assimilated with the existing Canaanite population, adopting some customs while maintaining their own identity. They were not yet a unified kingdom, but a collection of tribes sharing common beliefs and struggles, threatened by powerful neighbors like the Philistines who controlled the coastal regions. By 1080 before the Common Era, the scattered Israelite tribes recognized they needed unified leadership to survive. Their first king was Saul, a warrior who fought bravely against the Philistines but whose reign ended in tragedy. After him came David, initially a shepherd boy who had slain the giant Philistine champion Goliath with just a sling and stone. David proved to be not just a warrior but a brilliant political leader who united the fractious tribes and established a true kingdom. His greatest strategic move was capturing the Canaanite city of Jerusalem and making it his capital. Jerusalem sat between the northern and southern tribes, belonging to neither, making it the perfect neutral ground for his united kingdom. David brought the sacred Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, transforming the city into not just a political center but the spiritual heart of Israel. David's son Solomon inherited a kingdom at the height of its power and wealth. Solomon, whose name means peace, consolidated his father's conquests and turned Israel into a regional power that could negotiate as equals with mighty empires like Egypt and Tyre. His greatest achievement was constructing the first temple in Jerusalem, a magnificent building that took 7 years to complete. This wasn't just any temple, It was designed to house the Ark of the Covenant itself, making Jerusalem the undisputed center of Israelite worship. Solomon's reign saw unprecedented prosperity, with gold flowing into the royal treasury, massive building projects transforming cities, and wisdom traditions flourishing. Tradition holds that Solomon could speak with animals and commanded demons, but historical records show he was primarily a shrewd diplomat and administrator who maintained peace through strategic marriages and trade agreements. But even Solomon's legendary wisdom couldn't prevent the kingdom from fracturing after his death. His brutal taxation policies and forced labor projects had created deep resentment, especially in the northern tribes. When Solomon's son Rehoboam refused to ease these burdens, the kingdom split in two around 931 before the Common Era. The northern region kept the name Israel, establishing their capital at Samaria, while the southern region became the Kingdom of Judah with Jerusalem as its capital. What had been David and Solomon's united kingdom was now two separate nations, sometimes allies, sometimes enemies, but never again achieving the glory days of the Golden Age. The northern kingdom of Israel was larger and more prosperous, but the southern kingdom of Judah held Jerusalem and the temple, giving them immense religious authority. For 2 centuries, both kingdoms survived, though not without constant threats. Kings rose and fell, some wise, many corrupt. The northern kingdom of Israel saw particular instability, with dynasties violently replacing each other. King Omri and his son Ahab brought temporary stability and even prosperity to Israel in the 9th century before the Common Era, expanding trade and building impressive fortifications. But a far greater threat was emerging from the east. The Assyrian Empire, the most fearsome military machine the ancient world had yet seen, was expanding relentlessly. Their armies were legendary for their brutality and their innovative siege warfare. By 722 before the Common Era, despite desperate resistance, the northern kingdom of Israel fell to the Assyrian king Sargon II. The Assyrians had a terrifying policy. They deported entire populations to prevent rebellion, scattering the people of Israel across their vast empire. The fate of those northern tribes scattered across the Assyrian Empire gave birth to the legend of the lost 10 tribes of Israel, peoples who disappeared into history, their ultimate fate unknown. Meanwhile, the southern kingdom of Judah watched in horror and prepared for their own survival. King Hezekiah of Judah, witnessing Samaria's destruction, embarked on massive defensive preparations. He constructed the famous Siloam Tunnel, an engineering marvel that brought water into Jerusalem from outside the walls, ensuring the city could withstand a long siege. He built the Broad Wall, massive fortifications that still stand today. When the Assyrians came in 703 before the Common Era, Jerusalem somehow survived where Samaria had fallen. The Bible attributes this to divine intervention, while historians note Hezekiah's excellent preparations and diplomatic payments of tribute. Judah's survival was temporary. A new power arose in the East, Babylon. After the Assyrian Empire collapsed in 612 before the Common Era, the Babylonians became the new masters of the Near East. King Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon, one of history's great conquerors, turned his attention to Judah. In 598 before the Common Era, Babylonian armies surrounded Jerusalem. This time, there would be no miraculous survival. The Babylonians breached the walls, razed Solomon's magnificent temple to the ground, and carried off everything of value. But their most devastating weapon wasn't fire or siege engines, it was deportation. They selected the aristocrats, the priests, the scribes, the skilled craftsmen, and marched them in chains to Babylon. This Babylonian captivity would fundamentally transform the Jewish people and their religion in ways no one could have predicted. In exile in Babylon, surrounded by the grandeur of hanging gardens and massive ziggurats, the Jewish people faced an existential crisis. Their entire religious worldview had been built on a simple premise. Worship Yahweh exclusively and He will protect you. Keep His laws and you will prosper in your promised land. But now their temple lay in ruins, their land was occupied, their people were slaves in a foreign land. If their God had protected them, how did this happen? The answer the Jewish priests and scholars developed during this captivity would change everything. They concluded that the destruction happened because they hadn't worshipped Yahweh exclusively enough, they had allowed worship of other gods to creep in. The solution was strict monotheism. Yahweh wasn't just the supreme God among many, he was the only God. This insight, born from tragedy, created Judaism as we recognize it today. Empires rise and empires fall, and Babylon's dominance was brief. In 538 before the Common Era, the Persian king Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon and instituted a revolutionary policy. He allowed conquered peoples to return home and practice their religions freely. For the exiled Jews, this was nothing short of miraculous. They returned to Jerusalem to find their city in ruins and their temple destroyed. But they rebuilt. The Second Temple, completed around 515 before the Common Era, may not have matched Solomon's original in grandeur, but it represented something even more important. A people who had survived extinction and preserved their identity. The priests codified their religious laws, established synagogues as places of study and worship, and created the foundations of rabbinical Judaism. This Second Temple period would last nearly 6 centuries, witnessing yet more conquerors and transformations. Then came a young Macedonian king who would change the world. Alexander the Great swept through the Persian Empire like a whirlwind in 334 before the Common Era, conquering everything from Greece to India in just a decade. He brought with him not just armies but Greek culture, philosophy, art, and language. The Jews of Judea found themselves caught in a cultural collision. Some embraced Hellenism, adopting Greek names, studying Greek philosophy, even building Greek-style gymnasiums in Jerusalem. Others fiercely rejected these foreign influences, seeing them as a threat to their religious identity. After Alexander's death, his empire fragmented, and Judea was caught between his successor kingdoms, first ruled by the Ptolemies of Egypt, then by the Seleucids of Syria. These new rulers generally left Jewish religious practices alone, until one king decided to force the issue. In 168 before the Common Era, the Seleucid king Antiochus IV Epiphanes made a catastrophic decision. He decided to force Hellenization on the Jews, outlawing Jewish religious practices and defiling the temple by sacrificing pigs on the altar and erecting statues of Greek gods. This was too much. A priest named Mattathias and his 5 sons, especially his son Judas called the Maccabee the Hammer, sparked a revolt that would shock the Seleucid Empire. Against overwhelming odds, these guerrilla fighters defeated professional armies. They recaptured Jerusalem and cleansed the temple in an event still celebrated as Chanukah. More remarkably, they established an independent Jewish kingdom, the Hasmonean dynasty, for the first time in over 400 years. For a brief moment, the Jews were masters of their own destiny once more. The Hasmonean dynasty ruled for about a century, but their independence attracted dangerous attention. The fabulously wealthy Nabatean kingdom to the south competed with them for trade routes, and internal conflicts weakened them from within. Brothers fought brothers for the throne, each seeking outside help. That outside help came from Rome. The Roman general Pompey the Great intervened in 63 before the Common Era, ostensibly to restore order, but Rome never left. They installed puppet kings, most famously Herod the Great in 37 before the Common Era. Though Herod renovated the Second Temple into a magnificent complex, he was Rome's creature, not the people's choice. Judea had become another province in Rome's vast empire, and the proud Jewish people who had survived Babylonians, Persians, and Greeks now faced their most formidable conqueror yet. The occupation bred resentment that would explode into violence. For over a century, tensions simmered under Roman rule until it finally boiled over in 66 of the Common Era. The Great Revolt, or First Jewish-Roman War, saw Jerusalem rise against the might of Rome. For a time, the rebels succeeded in pushing Roman forces out, but Rome never forgave rebellion. The future Emperor Titus arrived with veteran legions, surrounded Jerusalem and subjected it to a brutal siege. The defenders fought with desperate courage, but starvation and Roman siege engines eventually broke their resistance. In 70 of the Common Era, Roman soldiers poured through breached walls, killing thousands. They set fire to the Second Temple, and this time it would never be rebuilt. The Romans carried off the sacred temple treasures to Rome, parading them in triumph. The last holdouts retreated to the mountain fortress of Masada, where they chose suicide over slavery, ending the revolt in 73 of the Common Era. But the Jewish people's resistance wasn't finished. The Kitos War erupted in 115 of the Common Era across the eastern Mediterranean, another desperate attempt to throw off Roman domination. It failed, bringing more slaughter. Then, in 132, came the final, most devastating revolt. The Emperor Hadrian planned to build a new Roman city called Aelia Capitolina on Jerusalem's ruins, with a temple to Jupiter on the sacred Temple Mount. A charismatic leader named Simon Bar Kokhba led a rebellion that actually succeeded in reclaiming Jerusalem and establishing independent rule for 3 years. But Rome sent its finest general, Julius Severus, who systematically crushed the revolt by 136. The Roman response was genocidal: thousands slaughtered, villages burned, survivors sold into slavery. Hadrian banned Jews from Jerusalem on pain of death, renamed the province Syria Palestina to erase Jewish connection, and attempted to destroy the Jewish identity itself. After Hadrian's destruction, the Jewish people scattered across the known world in what became known as the diaspora. For nearly 2,000 years, there would be no Jewish kingdom in the land called Israel. The people preserved their identity through religion, scholarship, and memory, always remembering Jerusalem and the promise of return. Through medieval persecutions, expulsions from European kingdoms, and unspeakable horrors, they endured. The ancient kingdom of Israel had fallen, but the Jewish people never disappeared. Their story of survival against impossible odds, of maintaining identity without homeland, of remembering ancient glory through centuries of exile, remains one of history's most remarkable tales. The modern State of Israel, established in 1947 and 48 by the United Nations, rekindled connections to this ancient heritage. Though the relationship between ancient kingdom and modern state continues to spark passionate debate among historians, theologians, and political thinkers worldwide. Enjoyed learning about this incredible historical journey? Give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more fascinating stories from ancient history. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our next exploration of the civilizations and events that shaped our world. See you in the next one.